Thank you, Chairman. Doctor, thank you for being here today. Just a few quick questions that I really want to focus and drive home with you, and I want us to try to take a step back together, because I don't know if you were able to hear some of our opening remarks, but I thought Representative Darby put it very well in his opening, in that we are not here. It is not our role as the legislature to retry this case. We have to be very cognizant and careful not to act as some sort of super appellate court. And I hear those concerns, I share those concerns, and we have to be, members, laser focused on staying in our lane. Does that make sense to you, Doctor? Of course.
Certainly.
Okay. So I want to be, this has been a very, very helpful, a very thorough and helpful overview, not only for the members of this committee, other legislators tuned in, the people here, but for all of those tuned in or watching online who are focused on this case. And I think the question that, as I seek to wrap my arms around this and think about the very purpose we're here, and I think about representing my constituents, Doctor, is I want to ask you this question. I think this is maybe what people who are tuned in right now are wondering the most. How does this happen? If everything you've said is accurate, and I believe that it is, in my own independent review of the record, everything you've said is 100% accurate, and there's a lot more that you haven't gotten to. How does this happen in our system? And if we're here to recognize holes in the system, weaknesses in the system, problems in the system, to strengthen our criminal justice system, Doctor, I would ask you to answer that question. How does this happen? Because to me, this is not a shaken baby case. This is an ineffective assistance of counsel case. And my hypothesis is that had Mr. Roberson had effective assistance of counsel, as he's constitutionally able to have, then we wouldn't be here today. Do you agree with that? And can you kind of can you go into more in depth on why this has happened and what we can do to fix it?
Well, you know, I talked about what we did at CSI, for example, and some people might say that in America you're entitled to the best defense money can buy, and we did a lot of pro bono work. You know, we either charge our fee or we charge nothing. Because if you look at the population on death row, or you look at the population in prison, there's an overrepresentation of minorities. There's an overrepresentation of low socioeconomic.
Rich white guys don't get the death penalty, do they?
No, they don't. And they don't get a lot of prison time, either one. And so the fact of the matter is, when you get a public defender, and I know a lot of public defenders that are passionate, dedicated, and hardworking. And they got a stack of files on the corner of their desks that you can't even see over.
That's right.
And then I know some that are just, you know, kind of checking the boxes. This is like everything else. There's a broad range, but I know a lot of dedicated, hardworking public defenders. But they're just so overworked and spread so thin that it's just impossible to give a fair representation to every client. But if you look at the number of exonerations, it's scary. You know, you're either for the death penalty or not. And if you are for the death penalty, you have to be for doing everything in your power to ensure that those who face that ultimate sentence have had a fair trial and are guilty insofar as we can determine. I mean, you have to do everything. You can't kind of say sort of maybe we've got this right. And if 1107 says you can't do junk science. You can't have something that has evolved, and we're going to ignore that it's evolved and just use what was there at the time and keep them in jail, even though we now know better.
Sure.
If you execute people when you now know better, you need to abolish the death penalty. If that's the standard by which you're going to execute people, then you got a bad system.
So am I correct in assuming that Mr. Roberson could not afford at the time, could probably not afford CSI, correct?
Yeah, probably.
Okay, he couldn't. I mean, there's other. It's not casting aspersions on CSI.
No,
I've worked with
listen,
CSI before, and they're the best in the business. But the point is that Mr. Roberson simply could not afford the resources to provide himself not only effective assistance of counsel, but the full assistance of counsel for a capital murder case in which the prosecutor decided, I believe, grossly negligently so, to seek the death penalty on. Mr. Roberson was afforded the minimal, and that's probably even being generous and putting it nicely, the minimal assistance of counsel. And in many cases, his counsel actually worked against his interests. And so my opinion is that he had virtually no counsel. And I, like you, and I think many members of this committee and other legislators, we get asked, Doctor, you might know this, but we get asked all the time. We get letters from inmates on death row. We get asked very frequently to review cases, to get involved, to speak out. Since I've been in office 12 years, I've received maybe over 100 of them. And I've only gotten involved in 3 death penalty cases. The case of Jeff Wood, the case of Melissa Lucio, and the case now of Robert Roberson. And without fail, in all 3 cases, it all comes back to ineffective assistance of counsel, because all of the facts that you've talked about here, all of these questions, all of the evidence that was not introduced at trial, the jury had no knowledge of it, members. None of that none of that is part of the appellate record. And so the system cannot work when it's built upon a foundational basis that all this evidence is not part of. So our courts of appeals can't review the evidence. The record is so defective. The case in and of itself is so defective. And so let me ask you this in closing. Do you believe that if Mr. Roberson is simply afforded a new trial, which is all I'm asking for, I believe that's all I don't want to speak for the members of the committee, but that's what I want, is just a new trial where maybe we could get him effective assistance of counsel and have someone like CSI prepare his defense and present all this evidence. Do you believe there's any way that he would be convicted of capital murder?
I do not. I do not think he would be convicted. I think this is a case where there was no crime committed. I don't think we have the wrong person. I don't think a crime was committed. I think this was a case where, tragically, a child was chronically and acutely ill. I think there was some problems with medication, and I think that contributed. But I certainly don't think that this child was aggressed against. But what I've said is, when you have a circumstantial case, we don't know what happened behind those closed doors. I can't say that with 100% accuracy. I would be going beyond my skill set to say what happened behind that closed door. I don't know that. He woke up at 5 a.m. and says he found this child on the floor and with labored breathing, because she'd been sick for quite a while. He says he was able to get her feeling okay and put her back to bed. Should he have taken her at 5? I wasn't there, didn't see her, don't know. But he testifies that she got to feeling better, and this wasn't a new thing. He had only had her for a couple of months, but you saw the record. 46 times across 2 years. Put her back to bed. Then he finds her again, and now he races her to the hospital. I don't know that any crime took place, and I think if this full record and the testimony from Dr. Green and other pathologists, I think they would say no crime was committed here at all.
Doctor, thanks for being here.